The chamber of the Galactic Council was an architectural marvel, a vast cathedral of light and gravity-defying spires suspended within the heart of the core world citadel. Here, the most powerful species in the known universe convened. Ancient empires that had ruled for millennia, civilizations that had long since mapped the stars before humanity had even harnessed fire. At the center of the grand hall stood a single figure, Ambassador Elias Voss, representing the entirety of the human race. His dark eyes scanned the assembled delegates, reading their expressions, their body language. Some watched in cold disinterest. Others radiated open hostility. A few, just a few, seemed hesitant, as if they questioned the severity of the ruling about to be passed. At the head of the assembly, the High Arbiter of the Council, a being of the Virexian species, an elongated, insectoid race with crystalline chitin, spoke with a voice that reverberated across the chamber. Humanity stands before this council accused of repeated violations of interstellar law. Your kind has ignored our decrees, interfered in protected worlds, and expanded recklessly without restraint. The charges are undeniable. Voss squared his shoulders, his voice measured but firm. We have only done what every species here has done before us. We have sought a place in the stars, not as conquerors, but as equals. A murmur passed through the chamber. The Narration, a species of amphibious diplomats, exchanged cautious glances, while the Threx Dominion, warlike but bound by the Council's laws, scoffed openly. The High Arbiter continued. Equality. Your species has disrupted fragile ecosystems, ignored Council-imposed territorial boundaries, and advanced militarily at a pace that alarms even our most measured analysts. His crystalline fingers clicked against the podium. You are unpredictable, dangerous, unstable. Voss clenched his fists but did not break his composure. Dangerous? His voice remained steady. If humanity has shown aggression, it is only in self-defense. We have fought only when we were provoked, and we have honored every treaty we signed. The representative of the Zyth hegemony, an elder race known for their cold pragmatism, leaned forward. Their glowing eyes narrowed. And yet your kind builds warships at an unprecedented rate. Your people develop technology that defies our limitations. You do not seek balance, Ambassador. You seek dominance. Voss took a slow breath. We seek survival. The chamber fell silent. It was an uncomfortable truth. But the verdict had already been decided before the trial had even begun. The High Arbiter raised a hand. The Council has deliberated. Humanity is to be exiled. Effective immediately. All human colonies outside of Sol are to be dismantled. All trade with human territories is to be terminated. Any attempts to resist will be met with force. A ripple of reaction spread through the Council chamber. Some species nodded in grim satisfaction, others seemed indifferent. But one thing was clear. Humanity had just been cast out of the galactic order. Voss felt the weight of the ruling settle on his shoulders. He had known this was a possibility, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. He straightened, his voice unwavering. You believe you are condemning us to ruin. He let his gaze drift across the chamber, meeting the eyes of every species that had signed away humanity's future. You are wrong. The High Arbiter's expression did not change. The decision is final. Humanity's presence beyond its homeworld is forbidden. You will abide by this ruling, or you will be eradicated. Security drones began to hover closer, signaling the end of the proceedings. The human delegation turned, walking toward the exit. As Elias Voss stepped through the towering doors, he spoke one last promise under his breath. We will remember this day. And humanity left the halls of power, not in chains, but in silence. A storm was coming. The Galactic Council's decision spread through the cosmos like a wildfire. Within hours, every human colony beyond Sol received the official decree, an order to evacuate, to surrender their stations, to abandon everything they had built. Alpha Centauri, the first extrasolar human settlement. Families packed what little they could carry as Council enforcers arrived. Towering insectoid Virexians and cold-eyed Zyth officials overseeing the withdrawal. Human-built cities, once bustling hubs of trade and culture, were stripped bare, their infrastructure dismantled or seized by alien overseers. On Europa, where subterranean cities had been carved into ice, scientists locked away generations of research as the Council's ships loomed overhead. The humans there refused to destroy their work, but refused to hand it over either. If exile was their fate, they would take their knowledge with them. Not all complied peacefully. On Titan, one of Saturn's moons, a human mining operation went dark. The Council sent a detachment of Threx Dominion enforcers, expecting easy compliance. What they found instead was an empty facility. Its tunnels collapsed, its data wiped clean, and its workers vanished. The ships that had once ferried raw materials to the Council's supply chains had been scuttled and sunk beneath Titan's methane seas, ensuring that if humanity was to be exiled, they would leave behind nothing but ruins. There were whispers of resistance, of fleets disappearing into the void, of humans who refused to return to Earth, slipping beyond the edges of known space. The Council dismissed these as rumors. They had seen it before. Lesser species clinging to illusions of defiance, only to crumble under the weight of isolation. But humanity was different. On Earth, the skies were filled with ships returning from across the stars, fleets carrying the exiled home. But this was not a homecoming of defeat. The governments of Earth, once divided, united overnight. The Terran Assembly, a body created in the wake of humanity's first interstellar wars, took control. Nations set aside their rivalries, knowing that if they did not, their species would never survive. Factories once dedicated to trade contracts were repurposed for war. Shipyards on Mars turned toward constructing vessels that would never rely on Council technology again. The AI networks, once restricted under galactic law, were unleashed, learning, evolving, growing beyond the limits the Council had imposed. And beneath the icy surface of Europa, something extraordinary was discovered. The research team that had refused to surrender their work had stumbled upon something ancient, a precursor ruin buried deep beneath the ice. At first, they thought it was another long-dead artifact, another relic of a civilization that had vanished before recorded history. But then, the machines inside it woke up, and the knowledge they carried would change everything. Beneath the ice-crusted surface of Europa, in a research facility buried miles below the frozen wasteland, a handful of scientists huddled around their newly unearthed discovery. The chamber, hidden beneath layers of ice for what could have been millions of years, was not of human origin. Vast metal walls, untouched by time, pulsed faintly with an unknown energy. Symbols, carved into the alloy with impossible precision, glowed in response to their presence. Dr. Elena Sarek, the lead xenoarchaeologist, stood in stunned silence, her breath fogging in the cold air. Her hands trembled as she reached out, her fingertips grazing the smooth metallic surface of the structure. It was warm. Alive. Is it responding to us? Dr. Liao, the team's engineer, whispered in awe, his eyes fixed on the strange pulses of light moving across the walls like bioluminescent waves. Elena didn't answer. Instead, she placed her gloved palm against one of the symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a pulse of raw data surged into their neural interfaces. The researchers staggered back, gasping as streams of alien knowledge flooded their minds. It wasn't just information. It was a history, a warning, a blueprint for something far beyond human understanding. "Dear God," Elena murmured, her knees nearly buckling as she struggled to process the sheer scale of it. The facility was not a ruin. It had never been abandoned. The machines within had been waiting for someone like humanity to find them. Earth's response news of the discovery on Europa reached Earth faster than any official channels could contain. The Terran Assembly, already mobilizing after the exile decree, convened an emergency session. Inside the vast orbital command hall, political and military leaders from every nation gathered in tense silence as the Europa research team streamed their findings. Admiral Jonathan Kessler, one of the highest-ranking officers of the newly restructured Terran Defense Fleet, folded his arms as he watched the swirling holographic projections before him. Complex star maps, layered with ancient war routes, scrolled. Across the display, routes leading far beyond Council space, into the void the Council had always forbidden humanity from exploring. It's a damn treasure trove, Kessler muttered, his scarred face illuminated by the glowing symbols. This isn't just a relic, it's a roadmap. This changes everything, said Director Anaya Patel, head of the Earth Intelligence Directorate. Her sharp eyes flicked across the data streams. If the Council knew about this, if they hid it from us? They did, came the calm, but cold voice of Elias Voss, the former ambassador to the Galactic Council. He stood at the edge of the meeting, his hands clasped behind his back. They knew. That's why they exiled us. They weren't afraid of our wars or our expansion. His gaze darkened. They were afraid we'd find this. Silence fell over the room. The Council had called humanity reckless, dangerous, unstable. But perhaps the real danger was what humanity might become if given time, if given knowledge the Council had sought to bury. A decision was made that night, one that would shape the future of humanity. Earth would not surrender. The exile was no longer a punishment, it was an opportunity. The Black Exodus begins. The weeks that followed saw an explosion of activity unlike anything in human history. Shipyards on Mars and Luna roared to life, building not just warships, but something far greater. Vessels capable of deep space colonization, crafted with hybrid technology from the Europa ruins. The great exodus of humanity began. The Council had banished them from the stars, but they had never dictated where they could go. In the dead of space, far beyond the Council's reach, humanity vanished. Entire fleets disappeared into uncharted space. Some remnants remained in Sol, maintaining a careful illusion of weakness, but the real movement was happening beyond known borders, beyond Council control, and in the darkness, humanity forged its own empire. The Galactic Council, in its arrogance, believed the exile had broken humanity. To them, humanity had been a dangerous anomaly. Too aggressive, too unpredictable, too unwilling to bend to the authority of older, wiser species. The exile was meant to contain them, to reduce them to an isolated, stagnant world, bound forever to their home system. But the Council had made a grave miscalculation. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was not contained. The shadow fleets deep in the uncharted void, far beyond the borders of known space, the exiled Terran fleets reassembled in secrecy. Each departing vessel had been meticulously stripped of any Council-monitored systems. No transponders, no standard quantum communications, no traceable fuel signatures. Humanity had made itself invisible. These weren't just warships, but massive colony vessels, entire orbital cities drifting into the abyss. Their course was unknown. To the Council, plotted along the ancient star maps recovered from Europa's ruins. The maps led them through unstable wormholes, dead systems, and stellar graveyards, places even the most daring of alien civilizations refused to venture. Admiral Jonathan Kessler, now the de facto leader of humanity's fragmented military forces, stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Wrath, the most advanced battlecruiser ever constructed in secret by Earth's finest engineers. Unlike the ships designed under Council supervision, this one was different, a blend of human ingenuity and forgotten technology unearthed beneath Europa. "They'll come looking for us," Kessler said, staring out into the abyss beyond the ship's viewing deck. "They won't find us," replied Elias Voss, the former ambassador turned strategist. His expression was calm, but his words carried an edge of certainty. "We're moving beyond their reach. We are no longer part of their galaxy." What humanity was building, what they had become, was beyond what any species could have foreseen. The first new colony, Dagger's Rest, the first new human settlement beyond the reach of the Council, was founded in a star system previously thought uninhabitable. A rogue planet, drifting through the void without a sun. It was a cold, lightless world, named Dagger's Rest for the sheer hostility of its environment. But to humanity, it was perfect. Massive underground cities, pressurized and heated by geothermal vents, sprang to life beneath the surface. The Europa ruins technology, now fully integrated, provided self-sustaining power. Entire agricultural domes, designed to function without sunlight, allowed human civilization to flourish in the darkest depths of space. But Dagger's Rest was more than just a colony. It was the foundation of something greater. Forging a new empire, in the hollowed-out caverns of Dagger's Rest, human leaders convened for the first time since the exile. The Terran Assembly, once a bureaucratic council on Earth, was reborn. No longer bound by politics, no longer constrained by the oversight of alien laws. Now, it was something else. A council of war, an empire in exile, one that would never bow. Again, Admiral Kessler stood before the assembled leaders, his voice carrying through the halls of the underground stronghold. For centuries we built under their watchful eyes. For decades, we fought wars of their making. And in the end, they cast us aside. Not because we were weak, but because they feared what we might become. His gaze swept over the gathered soldiers, engineers, and visionaries who had followed. Humanity into the void. They wanted us gone. They wanted us forgotten. He clenched his fist. We will not be forgotten. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. This was no longer about survival. This was about destiny. The weapons they feared humanity had never been the most powerful species in the galaxy. They had no natural psionic abilities, no biologically superior warriors, no immense physical strength. But they had something far more dangerous. They adapted. And now, with no council laws restricting them, they evolved. Artificial intelligence, once shackled under alien oversight, was now fully unleashed, creating warships that could think, analyze, and fight with inhuman precision. Genetic enhancements, long forbidden by the Council, were now being tested. Human soldiers were faster, stronger, more resilient than ever before, and worst of all, the Europa technology, now completely understood, was being forged into something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity was no longer playing by the Council's rules. They were writing their own. And when the time came, the Council would learn what it meant to banish humanity to the void. Because humanity was coming back. And this time, they would not ask for a seat at the table. For decades, humanity remained silent. The Galactic Council watched, waiting for the exiled species to wither in obscurity. No signals, no expansion, no signs of civilization. Humanity had simply disappeared beyond the Council's reach. To most, it was assumed the exile had achieved its purpose. Humanity had been erased as a galactic force. But whispers began to spread. First, it was a freighter captain who claimed to have encountered a ghost ship, a vessel without registration, black as the void, moving without propulsion trails. Then, an exploratory drone vanished near a dying star, only for its final transmission to reveal something unnatural. A structure, massive and dark, hovering over the event horizon. And then, entire pirate fleets began to disappear. These were not coincidences. The void had not swallowed humanity. Humanity had become the void. The silent armada, deep within the uncharted regions, beyond the furthest mapped systems, humanity's empire had risen in absolute secrecy. The old ways of war had been abandoned. Instead of sprawling cities, human colonies were built beneath planetary crusts, hidden from orbital scans. Instead of slow, lumbering warships that projected power openly, the new fleet was silent. Blackened hulls that absorbed radar signals, drives that produced no detectable emissions. The Horizon Initiative, the secret division dedicated to human expansion, had perfected the concept of cloaked infrastructure. Entire shipyards now floated in the dark between stars, hidden inside the gravitational wells of rogue planets. Research stations orbited neutron stars, absorbing their radiation as cover, while ground installations were buried so deep in ice worlds that they became indistinguishable from natural formations. Humanity had become the very thing the Council feared most, a force unseen, a force that did not wait for war to begin, a force that struck first, the disappearance of Zeltarn Prime. The first true test of the new human empire came in the form of an alien world, Zeltarn Prime, a thriving trade hub under the control of the Var Dominion, a species known for its ruthlessness. For centuries, the Var had raided human colonies under the Council's passive watch, treating Terran settlements as acceptable losses in the grander balance of power. They had no reason to believe humanity would ever return. But one cycle, the planet fell silent. No distress calls, no evacuation orders. Council scouts arrived weeks later to find a dead world. Cities stood untouched, but not a single living being remained. The orbital defenses had been shut down, not destroyed. Every ship in the planetary docks had been powered down, as if abandoned. In the middle of the night, a single transmission was left behind, looping endlessly in the dead silence of space. The banished remember. The council convened in a panic. This was not the work of any known empire. No fleet had been detected. No invasions had been reported. It was as if Zeltarn Prime had simply ceased to exist in a single night. But for humanity, this was only the beginning. The unseen war, while the council debated, while the galaxy struggled to make sense of the phantom attacks, humanity prepared for the next phase of its ascension. The strategy was not conquest. It was eradication. Through the stolen archives of the council, Terran operatives identified the key architects of humanity's exile. The most powerful species, the most influential rulers, the policymakers who had condemned Earth. One by one, they began to vanish. An executive of the Var Dominion, found, drifting in his personal shuttle, eyes wide with terror, yet no sign of physical harm. A senator from the Telekar Union, his ship's AI malfunctioning as it piloted him directly into the crushing depths of a gas giant. A warlord from the Gorak tribes, his fortress reduced to a smoldering ruin overnight. No traces of weapon fire, only the remnants of a self-destruct system he had never activated. None of these deaths could be traced. No fleets had moved. No enemy had been seen. Yet every species knew. The banished had returned. The Council's last. Warning in desperation, the Council Supreme, the very body that had exiled humanity, convened for an emergency session. Representatives of every major species gathered in a secure station orbiting the heart of the galactic core, where no fleet could ever attack unseen. And yet, the moment they began their deliberation, the station's lights flickered. For the first time in history, the most secure facility in the galaxy was breached. A single message was displayed on every screen, every holotable, every neural implant of the council members present. The void does not forget. The exiled do not forgive. The emergency lights shut off completely, and when they came back on, the station's security footage had been wiped clean. Every internal scan had been scrubbed of data, and 3 of the council's highest-ranking officials lay dead in their seats, with no sign of a struggle. The message had been sent. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come for vengeance. The galaxy no longer spoke of humanity as an exiled race. They spoke of shadows, of whispers in the void, of ships that never appeared on scanners, of wars that ended before they began. The exiled had become something else entirely, an empire that did not rule through force, but through fear. Entire fleets were now hesitant to engage in open war. The major factions, once so confident in their power, hesitated to make bold moves, afraid that their aggression would summon the specter of humanity's wrath. But the Council could not simply submit to ghosts. They needed answers. And so, they sent the Ardent Dawn, a reconnaissance fleet led by Admiral Jorvik of the Ulari Dominion. His mission was simple: find the exiled, uncover their strength, and determine if they were a true threat to galactic order. Jorvik was no fool. He had studied humanity's history, their wars, their tenacity. He understood their capability for violence, but he believed the Council had been right to banish them. In his mind, humans were reckless, chaotic, a danger to themselves and others. If they had somehow survived exile, it was only a matter of time before they became a plague once more. He would find them, and he would bring back proof that they needed to be eradicated completely. The Ardent Dawn departed with 17 warships, each equipped with the most advanced tracking systems available. Every method of detection, from subspace resonance to quantum fluctuation scans, was employed to seek out the hidden empire. For weeks they scoured the edges of known space, venturing into dead zones and uncharted systems. At first there was nothing. No signals. No colonies. No stations. Then, on the 34th day, they received a distress call. A looping transmission, originating from an unnamed moon orbiting a brown dwarf star. The signal was unmistakably human, yet the message was garbled, fragmented, as if it had been repeating for centuries. Jorvik ordered an immediate investigation. His fleet approached the barren rock carefully, scanning for traps, but there was nothing unusual. No energy signatures, no planetary defenses. Just the signal, echoing, endlessly from an old Terran beacon. He sent down a team. What they found defied reason. The tomb of the forgotten. The surface of the moon was desolate, winds whipping through jagged canyons of black stone. The distress beacon stood alone, an ancient structure half buried in dust, its signal pulsing like a dying heartbeat. As the team approached, their HUDs flickered, interference. Then the first body was found, a skeletal form in a decayed Terran suit, slumped against the beacon, hands still clutching a rusted rifle. Around him, more remains, dozens, then hundreds. They were arranged in formation, as if they had died waiting for orders that never came. The bodies were old, too old, far older than humanity's exile. Jorvik, watching from orbit, listened as his officers struggled to make sense of it. This isn't possible. Humanity wasn't here before the banishment. But the beacon kept repeating. We held the line. We held the line. We held the line. Then the interference spiked. The transmission changed. A new message. One that had not been there before. You should not have come. Then, without warning, every ship in Jorvik's fleet lost power. The unseen war begins. The Ardent Dawn's crew scrambled to restore control, but every system was dead. The fleet, once a formation of 17 proud warships, now drifted powerless, trapped in the gravity well of the brown dwarf. And then the shadows moved. From the darkness between the stars, ships emerged, not on sensors, not through any known method of detection. They were simply there, as if they had always been, watching, human warships. But these were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. There were no markings, no visible engines, no heat signatures. They moved with an unnatural precision, gliding through space in perfect silence. Their hulls were blacker than the void itself, as if they absorbed all light, all signals. And then, the first shot was fired. It was not a beam, not a missile, it was a ripple. Space itself distorted, and the lead ship of Jorvik's fleet was simply gone. Not destroyed. Not torn apart. Just erased, as if it had never existed. Jorvik had no time to react. His fleet, his warships, one by one. They vanished. No wreckage. No explosions. Just silence. Until only the Ardent Dawn remained. The Admiral's final transmission was sent just moments before his ship disappeared. His voice was calm, but laced with something the Council had never heard from him before. Fear. They were never lost, he said. They were never hiding. We never should have exiled them. The message ended. The Ardent Dawn was gone. The Council's reckoning. When the Council received Jorvik's last transmission, panic swept through the great powers of the galaxy. For the first time, they understood the true consequences of their decision. Humanity had not simply survived exile. They had evolved beyond anything the Council had imagined. They no longer needed armies. They no longer needed fleets. They had become something more. A force that did not conquer planets, but erased empires before they could ever retaliate. The Galactic Council had spent centuries believing they had cast humanity into oblivion. But humanity had become the oblivion. The silence in the Council chambers was absolute. Then, a single transmission arrived, one that bypassed every security measure, appearing on every screen, every holodisplay, and every neural interface in the core worlds. It contained no demands, no declarations of war, only 5 words. The exiled do not kneel. The words haunted the Council. For centuries, they had believed that exile was the end of humanity's story. They had expected their absence to be a footnote in history, a failed species, cast adrift in the void, doomed to fade into irrelevance. But those 5 words, broadcast across every network, proved the Council had made a mistake. The exiled had not perished. They had not begged for mercy. They had forged something new, an empire without borders, without homeworlds, without chains, a force so elusive, so methodical, that the greatest powers in the galaxy had never even realized it was there. And now, the truth could no longer be ignored. The panic spreads. The disappearance of Admiral Jorvik's fleet was not an isolated event. Within days, key council stations began reporting strange anomalies. Entire battalions stationed in remote outposts stopped responding. Patrol fleets sent to investigate never returned. Worlds that had once whispered of humanity in myth and legend now spoke of them in hushed terror. The exiled were no longer a lost people. They were a shadow hanging over every civilization in the galaxy, and the Council was powerless to stop it. Desperate to maintain control, the Council convened an emergency summit. Every ruling species sent representatives, their fear barely concealed behind polished words and empty assurances. They argued, debated, accused one another of harboring hidden sympathies for humanity. But no one had an answer to the same unspoken question. What happens when the hunted become the hunters? The warning then. The council chambers darkened. Every light, every display shut down, not by an attack, not by sabotage, but by something deeper. The air itself grew heavy. Every voice fell silent. And then, a single transmission appeared. No face, no flag, no demand, just a voice calm and unyielding. You exiled us into the dark. You took our home, our people, and cast us into nothing. You expected us to die. The voice paused, and for the first time in the Council's history, fear replaced arrogance. But we are still here. A map appeared on the screen, stretching across the entire galactic core. Points of light flickered across it, marking every major capital, every fortress world, every fleet command. Then, one by one, the lights began to vanish. No explosions. No destruction. Just erasure. Entire sectors blinked out, replaced by an expanse of empty blackness. When the last light disappeared, the voice returned. The galaxy you knew is gone. This is our empire now. And then, the transmission ended. The fall of the Council. The next cycle, the first Council world fell. Not to an invasion, not to war, to silence. A thriving ecumenopolis, home to billions, was found lifeless. No signs of struggle, no bodies, no wreckage, just empty cities, darkened towers, and streets filled with abandoned vehicles, as if the entire population had simply vanished. And then came the next world, and the next. Each time, the same thing. No distress calls, no warnings, just emptiness. The Council fleets, once the most powerful military force in the galaxy, could do nothing. Every attempt to resist met the same fate. Warships that never returned, generals who went silent, defense systems that shut down as if they had never existed. The exiled were not waging war. They were removing those who had once ruled over them. Not with brute force, not with planetary bombardments, but with something far worse. Precision. Surgical elimination. A reckoning centuries in the making. The final days, the Council, once the supreme authority of the known galaxy, collapsed in weeks. The surviving members, those who had once dictated the fate of trillions, were left adrift in the void, hiding in nameless systems, afraid to even send distress signals lest they draw the attention of the unseen empire. Final transmission was sent from the last remnants of the Council, pleading for a ceasefire, begging for terms, for mercy. But no answer came. Only silence. The empire of the exiled. With the fall of the Council, the galaxy changed forever. Yet, no great human fleet emerged to claim the ruins. No capital was established. No new ruling body declared itself emperor. There was no need. Humanity did not desire a throne. They had already won. The old powers were gone, their fleets dismantled, their reign ended, and in their place, the exiled watched from the dark, ensuring that no empire, no ruler, would ever again decide the fate of another species. They had not sought vengeance, only balance. And so, among the whispers of the void, the legend of the exiled remained. Not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as a warning for those who would dare repeat the mistakes of the past, because the exiled did not kneel. They never had, and they never would.